Shalom Aleichem Rabotai. Welcome to Maasrot. The Mishnah Yomi is today beginning Maasrot, Mazel Tov, for those of us who have learned Trumot and finished our Trumot. Now we're moving on to Maasrot. It's very appropriate because when someone has produce in Eretz Yisrael, first they separate the Truma Gedola, that was the 2% of the produce, and then they move on to the Maaser Rishon, it's 10% of the remainder. And then the Maaser Sheni, the second tithe, is also 10% of the remainder. And recall, there is a chiluk that in years 1, 2, 4, and 5, the Maaser Sheni is taken to Yerushalayim by the original owner and consumed there or traded for money and then brought to Yerushalayim to buy food. In years 3 and 6, the Maaser Sheni is actually Maaser Ani. And in year 7, we learned Shvi'it, it is Potter, it is Hefker, and there is no Maaser. And so the Mishnah fittingly here states, Klol Amru b'Maasrot. There's a general rule about Maasrot, talking about which kinds of food are chayev in Maasrot, that you're required to take the tithes. Kol shu ochel, anything that is edible. You don't tithe wood or inedible parts. V'nishmar, and it's protected, meaning it's not hefker, it's not ownerless, or it's not the year of Shvi'it. Shvi'it is the 7th year, but things are considered hefker, ownerless, and available for everyone during that year. The Gedulav min aretz, it grows from the ground. This would exclude mushrooms and hydroponics. Chayev b'maasrot, these items are chayev to take the tithes. V'od klal acher amru, and our sages said another generality, kol shetchilato ochel, v'sofo ochel, anything that's originally food, and at the end it's food. The Bartanura says, Kagon Yerakot, vegetables, like a carrot. When a carrot is born, it's a small carrot, it's a baby carrot, but it's still edible. And as it grows, it's just a bigger carrot. So Mishnah continues, Afal pi, shu shomer lahosif ochel, even though you guard it or you leave it in the ground to add food, chayev koton v'godol. So your small carrot is chayev in Maaser, and you leave it in the ground, it gets bigger. The big carrot's also chayev in Maaser because it was already a food. Something that was not originally ochel, aval sofa ochel, but it becomes edible. Eino chayev ad sheyeh ochel. It's not chayev in Maaser until it becomes edible. The Bartner explains, kagon minei peirot, talking about fruits. Understand when an apple is a baby, it's not really edible. It has to get big enough to become edible. Because the pasuk brings, the Rav Bartner says, Mizera aretz mi priya eitz, ad sheyegodol v'yaseh pri. So from the produce of the land, from the fruits of the tree, it has to actually be an edible fruit, not just a flower or a bud or a little thing that's not edible yet. Now Mishnah Bet, moving on to the second Mishnah, continues explaining, so these fruits that we're talking about that need to be edible, when are they edible? When are the fruits chayav and Maaser? Hata'enim, figs, mishayavchilu. Once they start to ripen, the Farshim say the tip whitens. Ha'anovim v'ha'avoshim mishahivishu. The grapes and the avoshim grapes, these are sort of a less geschmack grape. When you can see the seeds through the skin gets a little bit translucent when it's ripe. Kol ha'adumim, ha'og v'tutim. This og is not the melech habashan. This og is a form of cherry, and the tutim is a mulberry. Sometimes it's translated as a strawberry. Mish yadimu, when they get red. V'chol ha'adumim, and anything that gets red, mish yadimu, when it gets the red, the right color, you know it's properly edible. So a white strawberry would not be chayiv in Maaser. It's not food yet. Harimonim, pomegranates, mishayimasu, when they get soft, they're ripe, they're edible. Hatamorim, the dates, mishyatilu saor, when they become like saor. Now saor is yeast or sourdough, famously from Pesach time. But the famous thing about the yeast is it makes cracks appear in the dough. So when the dates get sort of that texture on the outside, sort of the ridges, the cracks, then they're ready. Farsakim, the peaches, mishyatilu gidim, when they get these red sinewy streaks on the skin. Ha'egozim, and the walnuts, mishayasu megura, when they become like a storehouse. The Bartner explains, when the fruit the nut inside the shell separates from the shell, so that the shell on the outside, the hard outer shell, is like the storehouse for the inner nut itself. Rabbi Yehuda was an egos expert. He says, Egozi meshkedim mishiyasa klipa, when they make a klipa. Now, klipa usually means the shell. But here the Barner explains this is the klipa tachtona, smucha le'ochel. This is the lower membrane next to the actual food itself. So there's an outer hard shell, and then there's the inner brown membrane, both on walnuts and on shkedim. On almonds also have this brown layer, and it could be scraped off before you eat it. So Rabbi Yehuda says that's when they're ready. That's apparently formed last in their ripening, becoming a food process. The Berner says the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda. Shkoyach Rabosai, welcome to Maaser.